I stood by the window, coffee cooling in my hand, as my son's voice echoed from the night before. I just can't live with a mother who earns less than me, he'd said, calm, clean, like it was a fact written in granite. Below, the lights from his new apartment flickered, one floor beneath mine. He thought altitude came with ambition. He didn't know I owned the penthouse, and I didn't correct him. Because silence, I've learned, compounds faster than pride. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Dinner should have been ordinary. Tuesday night, chicken piccata, the soft hum of the dishwasher behind us. But the air was already stretched thin before anyone spoke. Jason's fork clicked against his plate, a sharp, impatient rhythm. Tiffany sat across from me, posture perfect, phone screen glowing under the table like a secret she couldn't wait to tell. I tried to keep the peace. "I'm glad you both could make it," I said. "Feels like we don't do this enough anymore." Tiffany didn't look up. "We've been swamped. The new apartment listings are insane right now." Jason cleared his throat, glancing at her for approval before turning to me. "Yeah, about that, Mom. We've been thinking. The condo's a little—" He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't make him sound cruel. "It's dated." I set down my fork. "It's home." Tiffany smiled thinly. "It's cozy?" "Sure. But Jason's been working so hard, and he deserves a place that reflects where he's going." I could feel the heat rise in my chest. Not anger yet. Just that quiet kind of shame that creeps up when people you love start measuring you. "Reflects where he's going," I repeated softly. "And where's that?" She leaned back, confident now. "Up." Jason exhaled through his nose like this conversation had been rehearsed. "We're thinking about getting a place higher up, something that fits our image. Maybe even in this building, if one opens up." I forced a smile. "You don't have to worry about me. I'm fine right here." That's when Tiffany put her fork down and said it. The line that sliced through everything. "You've done enough, Linda. But Jason can't keep living like this. He needs a place that reflects success." Jason didn't correct her. He didn't even look at me. It was strange how quiet the world went in that moment. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the clock above the stove, my own pulse tapping at my throat. "Success," I said finally, my voice thinner than I meant. "Interesting word." Jason cleared his throat. "Mom, don't take it the wrong way. I'm just trying to understand the right way." Silence again. Tiffany sipped her wine like she'd already won something. After they left, I sat by the window, lights of the city bleeding into the glass. Down below, traffic shimmered like veins of moving gold. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Not tired exactly, but still. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. Instead, I kept replaying Tiffany's words. He needs a place that reflects success. When did success stop being about peace? About decency? A soft knock pulled me from the thought. Clara's voice came through the door. "You still up?" "Yeah." "Come in." She stepped inside, her familiar cardigan trailing behind her, carrying that scent of chamomile tea and printer ink. "Saw their car leave. You look like you just read your own obituary." I laughed, small and brittle. "Maybe I did." She sat beside me, scanning my face. "What did he say this time?" "Nothing new. Just that my walls are too close together for his comfort." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Ungrateful brat." I shook my head. "He's not cruel, just lost. Tiffany's his compass, and unfortunately, she only points north to money." Clara leaned back, crossing her arms. You built that boy with more love than numbers. He'll remember eventually. I looked out the window again, at the skyline, the thousands of lights winking like secrets. Maybe. But tonight, he made something very clear. What's that? That value's written in numbers now. Square footage, salaries, cars. Clara sighed. And what are you going to do about it? I turned to her slowly, feeling the steel return under my ribs. Show them a different kind of ink. Clara smiled faintly, recognizing that tone. That's the Linda Harper I know. Quiet storm, table for one. I smiled too, but mine didn't reach my eyes. Because deep down, I already knew what was coming. Not the plan, not yet. Just the pulse of something inevitable. The city lights outside flickered like a dare, and somewhere in the hum of that moment a single truth settled. They thought they'd moved above me. They had no idea how high I could go. By morning, the air in my condo felt different, thinner, emptied somehow. As if the night had stolen something I hadn't noticed leaving. Jason called early, his voice clipped, professional. Mom, we've been looking at places. You should start thinking about finding a smaller rental. Something easier to manage. He said it like he was suggesting vitamins for my age. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. You mean, move out of the home your father and I built? There was a pause, long enough for guilt to try to break through, but not long enough for it to win. It's not personal, Mom. It's just practical. You don't need all that space. I see, I said. Practical. When the call ended, I didn't move for a long time. The silence after Jason's voice faded felt like an echo of all the things I hadn't said. By noon, Tiffany had already posted something online, helping my sweet Emile downsize. Great starter apartment. Same building. Lovely lower floor. Her caption had a little heart emoji at the end, as if kindness were something she could accessorize. Clara stopped by in the afternoon with groceries and a look that could have cut steel. I saw the post, she said, setting down a bag of lemons. She tagged the building. That woman doesn't even pretend to have shame. I didn't answer. I was standing by the bookshelf, sliding out photo albums, wiping the dust from their edges. She's just efficient, I murmured. Gets things done fast. You're really doing this, aren't you? Clara asked. I nodded, folding a sweater into a box. It's easier than fighting. She crossed her arms. You're letting them win. That word, win, landed hard. I looked up at her. No, I'm just switching floors. Her eyes narrowed, reading something beneath my calm. Linda, she said slowly, what are you planning? I smiled. Small, private. You'll see. The afternoon light shifted gold against the parquet floors. Each item I packed felt like a piece of the life I'd built with careful hands and steady math. Numbers that once balanced perfectly until Jason started chasing decimals with faces. When I reached the mantel, I stopped. My late husband's watch rested there, still and waiting. The leather was cracked, the glass a little fogged around the edges. I ran my thumb across it, remembering how he used to check it before leaving for work. Always 5 minutes early, always steady. I placed it gently on the table beside my keys. Some things don't belong in boxes. Outside, the city was starting to glow again, the same skyline Jason thought measured success. I turned on the lamp by the couch and sat for a while, looking around. The walls weren't small, they just held stories he'd forgotten to value. Finally, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Harper Residence, a man's voice answered. Low, warm, familiar. Evan, I said. There was a pause. Ms. Harper? Wow, been a long time. Too long, I said, letting a hint of nostalgia color my tone. Tell me, how's the building these days? Still standing, he said with a chuckle. A few upgrades, a few new headaches. You thinking of selling? No, I said softly. I'm thinking of moving back in. I heard his chair creak. Back in? Where? I let the silence stretch, just long enough for the answer to sound deliberate. It's time to reopen Unit PH1. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then his voice dropped an octave. The penthouse? After all these years? Yes, I said. After all these years. There was something gratifying in the weight of that phrase, the way it rolled through the air like a secret rediscovered. I'll make the arrangements, he said quietly. Place has been waiting for you, you know. I know, I whispered. I've been waiting for it too. After I hung up, I looked around the condo one last time. Half-packed boxes lined the walls, but it didn't feel like leaving. It felt like returning to the part of myself I'd kept in storage. Through the window, the lake caught the last of the sunlight, a sheet of fire melting into blue. Tomorrow, I would start fresh. But tonight, as the city lights blinked awake one by one, I thought of Jason and Tiffany standing in some real estate office, chasing ceilings they didn't know were already under me. And for the first time in years, I smiled, because while they were climbing, I was already above them, quietly, deliberately, invisibly, packing the quiet that would become their undoing. 3 the keys above the skyline, 580 words. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed, its mirrored walls catching slivers of my reflection. I looked composed, hair-pinned, scarf neat, but my pulse betrayed me. It wasn't nerves exactly, it was recognition. You don't return to a place like this, you ascend back into it. Evan met me in the lobby before the penthouse level. He hadn't changed much. Same kind eyes, same easy posture that made people forget he ran the most exclusive building in Chicago. It's good to see you, Ms. Harper, he said, pressing the elevator button with a practiced swipe of his keycard. Or should I say, welcome home. Let's start with Linda, I said. Feels less like an audit. He laughed softly. You always did hate titles. As the doors opened to the top floor, light poured in like it had been waiting years to breathe again. The penthouse stretched before us, floor-to-ceiling glass wrapping around a space that seemed to float over the lake. Dust still lingered in the corners, faint outlines where furniture once stood, but the bones were perfect, quiet, strong, untouchable. Evan stepped aside, giving me the moment. Still pristine, he said. I walked slowly across the room, my heels echoing in the vastness. The city below shimmered through the glass, every light alive with its own small ambition. You've kept it secret even from your son? Evan asked, watching me trace my hand along the windowsill. I turned toward him. He's allergic to humility, I said evenly. I didn't want to feed it. Evan nodded, a knowing smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Can't say I blame you. I stopped near the edge of the balcony doors, staring out at the lake. Its surface a shifting mosaic of silver and blue. I bought this place after Robert passed, I said quietly. Didn't tell anyone. I needed something separate, something that was mine. He tilted his head. Freedom disguised as real estate? That made me smile. Exactly that. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside, the keys gleamed. A new set, polished, cold, waiting. When he placed them in my hand, they felt heavier than I remembered. You're the only person who ever called this unit by name, he said. PH1, Everyone else just said the penthouse. Names matter, I said, curling my fingers around the metal. This one always meant something. The echo of my late husband's watch ticked in my memory, even though I'd left it downstairs in my old condo. I ran my thumb along the marble counter, still smooth, still perfect. Time to reoccupy my worth, I whispered. Evan caught it, his eyes flickering with respect. You know, most people would sell a place like this. Cash out, move to Florida. I'm not most people, I said. Besides, I'm not here to rest. I'm here to reclaim. Before he could ask what that meant, Clara appeared in the doorway, winded from the private service elevator. You two look like a real estate ad, she said, setting down a tote bag full of papers. Just don't start talking about market trends, or I'll throw myself off the balcony. Evan chuckled and excused himself. I'll leave you ladies to it. Welcome back, Linda. When the doors shut behind him, Clara took a slow turn around the room. Still looks like a museum in here, she muttered. And don't get sentimental. It doesn't suit you. Who said I was sentimental? I asked, sliding the curtains open wider. The lake blazed under the late afternoon sun. I know that look, she said. You're calculating. I turned toward her. You told me to stop letting them win. I listened. She crossed her arms, assessing me. So what's the play? I smiled faintly. You'll see it unfold. Just promise you'll help with the paperwork when the time comes. Clara sighed. You're going to make me your co-conspirator again, aren't you? I'd never insult you with anything less. She shook her head but smiled. Then I suppose I'll need coffee, and maybe immunity. We both laughed, but the sound faded quickly, absorbed by the wide, empty space. I turned back toward the skyline, the keys still warm in my palm. The city stretched endlessly, every tower like a chess piece waiting to be moved. Below, my son was probably scrolling through listings, dreaming of height. He had no idea that the view he wanted, the one he thought proved his worth, was already mine. I tightened my grip around the keys, the metal pressing sharp crescents into my skin. This wasn't just a return, it was the opening move. The elevator hummed quietly as it climbed, its mirrored walls catching slivers of my reflection. I looked composed, hair pinned, scarf neat, but my pulse betrayed me. It wasn't nerves exactly, it was recognition. You don't return to a place like this. You ascend back into it. Evan met me in the lobby before the penthouse level. He hadn't changed much. Same kind eyes, same easy posture that made people forget he ran the most exclusive building in Chicago. It's good to see you, Ms. Harper, he said, pressing the elevator button with a practiced swipe of his keycard. Or should I say, welcome home? Let's start with Linda, I said. Feels less like an audit. He laughed softly. You always did hate titles. As the doors opened to the top floor, light poured in like it had been waiting years to breathe again. The penthouse stretched before us, floor-to-ceiling glass wrapping around a space that seemed to float over the lake. Dust still lingered in the corners, faint outlines where furniture once stood, but the bones were perfect, quiet, strong, untouchable. Evan stepped aside, giving me the moment. Still pristine? He said. I walked slowly across the room, my heels echoing in the vastness. The city below shimmered through the glass, every light alive with its own small ambition. You've kept it secret even from your son? Evan asked, watching me trace my hand along the windowsill. I turned toward him. He's allergic to humility, I said evenly. I didn't want to feed it. Evan nodded. a knowing smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Can't say I blame you. I stopped near the edge of the balcony doors, staring out at the lake, its surface a shifting mosaic of silver and blue. I bought this place after Robert passed, I said quietly. Didn't tell anyone. I needed something separate, something that was mine. He tilted his head. Freedom disguised as real estate? That made me smile. Exactly that. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside, the keys gleamed. A new set. Polished. Cold. Waiting. When he placed them in my hand, they felt heavier than I remembered. You're the only person who ever called this unit by name, he said. PH1. Everyone else just said the penthouse. Names matter, I said, curling my fingers around the metal. This one always meant something. The echo of my late husband's watch ticked in my memory, even though I'd left it downstairs in my old condo. I ran my thumb along the marble counter, still smooth, still perfect. Time to reoccupy my worth, I whispered. Evan caught it, his eyes flickering with respect. You know, most people would sell a place like this. Cash out. Move to Florida. I'm not most people, I said. Besides, I'm not here to rest. I'm here to reclaim. Before he could ask what that meant, Clara appeared in the doorway, winded from the private service elevator. You two look like a real estate ad, she said, setting down a tote bag full of papers. Just don't start talking about market trends, or I'll throw myself off the balcony. Evan chuckled and excused himself. I'll leave you ladies to it. Welcome back, Linda. When the doors shut behind him, Clara took a slow turn around the room. Still looks like a museum in here, she muttered. And don't get sentimental, it doesn't suit you. Who said I was sentimental? I asked, sliding the curtains open wider. The lake blazed under the late afternoon sun. I know that look, she said. You're calculating. I turned toward her. You told me to stop letting them win. I listened. She crossed her arms, assessing me. So, what's the play? I smiled faintly. You'll see it unfold. Just promise you'll help with the paperwork when the time comes. Clara sighed. You're going to make me your co-conspirator again, aren't you? I'd never insult you with anything less. She shook her head but smiled. Then I suppose I'll need coffee, and maybe immunity. We both laughed, but the sound faded quickly, absorbed by the wide, empty space. I turned back toward the skyline, the keys still warm in my palm. The city stretched endlessly, every tower like a chess piece waiting to be moved. Below, my son was probably scrolling through listings, dreaming of height. He had no idea that the view he wanted, the one he thought proved his worth, was already mine. I tightened my grip around the keys, the metal pressing sharp crescents into my skin. This wasn't just a return. It was the opening move. A week later, my phone was flooded with notifications I hadn't asked for. Tiffany's latest post filled the screen. New beginnings. Our skyline view finally matches our ambitions. Dresser next. Chapter Dancer power couple. The photo showed them on a balcony, glass of champagne in each hand. The city stretched behind them like a trophy. I recognized the building, just a few blocks from mine. High enough to feel powerful, low enough not to see me. Clara forwarded the post with a single word. Predictable. I typed back. Almost poetic. By mid-morning, Tiffany texted directly. Dinner this Friday 6-ish? Jason wants to celebrate the move with you. We'll confirm later. She didn't. She never would. That was her way of inviting and excluding in the same breath. An art form of control disguised as courtesy. So I made other plans. My own dinner, my own celebration. When Friday arrived, the city was caught between autumn and winter, the skyline wrapped in a thin mist that made every light look softer. I spent the afternoon unpacking boxes in the penthouse, plates I hadn't used in years, crystal glasses that still held faint echoes of laughter from a time before Jason cared about square footage. By 6, Clara arrived with a bottle of red and the kind of grin that always meant mischief. I figured if Tiffany can host a party for likes, she said, we can host one for sanity. Evan came not long after, wearing a clean white shirt that made him look unexpectedly formal. His daughter Olivia trailed behind him, holding a small box of cupcakes. Dad said I could come if I promised not to touch anything fancy, she said earnestly. I knelt to her level. You can touch anything you want, I said. Everything in here's been waiting to be alive again. She smiled, a wide, honest thing, and skipped off to the balcony. Dinner was simple but warm. No pretenses. Clara handled the wine. Evan helped me with the roast. Olivia told us about her art project. Something about drawing buildings with faces because, as she explained, they all look like they're thinking too hard. We laughed. A real laugh, the kind that shakes the dust off a room. I glanced at the view beyond the glass. Across the darkening skyline, I could see the faint glow of Jason's new apartment. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Same skyline, different souls. Pretty view, Clara said, following my gaze. Bet Tiffany's already named her reflection. I smiled. Probably calls it manifestation. Evan laughed under his breath. You two are dangerous when you agree. Experience, Clara said, raising her glass. We've earned the right to be dangerous. I looked around the table. The easy laughter, the warmth, the feeling of a home that didn't need to prove itself. My chest loosened in a way I hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. When Olivia wandered back from the balcony, she stopped by the glass wall, eyes wide. This is the prettiest place ever, she whispered. Her sincerity disarmed me. Let's keep it our secret, I said. She nodded solemnly, as if she understood the weight of a promise. For a long while, the only sounds were forks on china, the faint hum of the city below, and the laughter of a child who didn't care about rent or image, or the cruel algebra of status. After dessert, Clara leaned back in her chair, watching me. You look lighter, she said. Maybe because I finally stopped waiting for their approval, I said. It's amazing how much higher you can stand when you're done bowing. She grinned. There's the woman I remember. Evan gathered plates, shaking his head. You three could run the world if you wanted. Not the world, I said softly, watching the skyline blink. Just one building at a time. Later, when everyone left and the penthouse fell quiet again, I walked to the window. Across the night, Jason's balcony door opened, just a flicker of movement. Tiffany stepped out, phone raised, chasing another perfect picture. For a heartbeat, I thought she looked straight toward me, but I knew she couldn't see. The penthouse sat too high, too far beyond the range of their ambition. I touched the cool glass and smiled. The lights from their building reflected faintly in mine, like two worlds stacked on the same dream, one built on illusion, one built on ownership. And as I turned away, locking the balcony doors, I whispered to the empty room, "Enjoy your view, Tiffany. You're looking up at mine." The first snow arrived the same morning Tiffany announced her next conquest. I woke to Clara's text. No greeting, no pleasantries, just a screenshot. Jason and I are buying a condo soon, maybe in Mom's building. Dream big. Skyline goals. I stared at it over my coffee, the steam rising like applause from the universe. Beneath the caption, Tiffany had tagged a local realtor and posted a picture of herself in a white coat, chin lifted like she already owned the sky. Clara called seconds later. "Tell me this isn't real." "Oh, it's real," I said, sipping slowly. "She's announcing their next miracle before she's even found the church." Clara's laugh crackled through the line. "You're disturbingly calm." "Calm is underrated." I set the mug down, the echo sharp against the marble counter. "He's about to apply for a mortgage under my roof." That silenced her. "Wait, you mean—" "Yes." I walked toward the wall, safe built behind an old landscape painting. The keypad was stiff from disuse. I pressed each number like a small act of resurrection. When the door clicked open, the faint smell of paper and time spilled into the air. Inside sat neat folders, deeds, trust papers, ledgers, every piece of proof that for 23 quiet years, I'd owned not just PH1, but the identical sister unit 1 floor below. PH2. Ownership since 2002. Quiet. Clean. Legal. I ran my finger across the embossed lettering on the title, the ink cool and absolute. "Linda," Clara said on speakerphone, "what exactly are you thinking?" I smiled to myself. "Thinking? No, I'm calculating." "You're seriously going to let them move into your property?" "Let?" I said. "Oh, Clara, I'm going to make them pay market rate." A low whistle. "You really are the quiet storm I warned the world about." I closed the safe gently, aligning the papers with the precision of a surgeon. Outside, the snow kept falling. Soft, endless, pure. It was almost poetic, how something could blanket the city in white while I planned a revenge wrapped in calm. By noon, I called Evan. He picked up on the first ring. "Ms. Harper, sorry, Linda, I was just about to email you some maintenance reports." "Evan, I need a small favor," I said, pacing slowly across the wide living room. "If a certain couple comes asking about listings, Jason and Tiffany Harper, direct them to PH2. It's owned by Harper Holdings LLC." He hesitated. "That's your corporation, isn't it?" "Yes." A pause, then a quiet laugh. "You're really going to let your son rent from you?" "Not let," I said. "Arrange. There's a difference." He exhaled, half amused, half awed. "You sure about this?" "Completely. He wanted distance. Now he'll have it. Exactly 1 floor below me." "Market rate?" he asked, voice tipping toward admiration. "Of course. Mercy spoils faster than milk." Evan chuckled. "You have a poetic way of being ruthless, Linda." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "That's called experience." After hanging up, I sat at the dining table, the city muted beneath the storm. There was no gloating, no self-congratulation, just an odd, steady peace. For years, Jason had seen me as a number that didn't add up to his idea of success. Now, the math was finally in my favor. I took out a notepad and began to write. Property taxes, lease terms, payment clauses. Precision was my inheritance, grace, my disguise. Clara would call this revenge, but I knew better. It was restoration, quiet, thorough, untraceable. That evening, she dropped by unannounced, shaking snow from her coat. "You're glowing," she said, narrowing her eyes. "That's either good skincare or something wicked." "Neither," I said, pouring her tea. "Just business." She sat across from me, studying my face. "You know, you could tell him. End the charade before it begins." "And ruin the lesson?" I said softly. "No. He's been lecturing me on value for years. Let him live inside the definition." Outside, the wind carried a soft whistle through the vents, an eerie, soothing sound. The city lights flickered, and for a second, I imagined Jason scrolling through listings, fingers trembling as he compared prices, unaware that every number led straight to me. Clara shook her head, smirking. You should have gone into politics. I did, I said. It's just domestic. We both laughed, the sound short and knowing. Then, as the laughter faded, I looked out the window. Across the snow-dusted skyline, Jason's building glowed faintly gold. I traced it with my eyes, every window, every dream. He was chasing ownership. I was redefining it. And somewhere between those two pursuits, the balance of power quietly shifted. By late January, the city had thawed just enough for ambition to move again. I could feel it in the pulse of the streets, snow melting off car roofs, real estate banners fluttering with words like exclusive, limited, luxury. The perfect season for my son to overextend himself. Evan called that morning, his voice edged with restrained amusement. You'll want to hear this, he said. They booked a showing. PH2. Noon. I smiled into my coffee. Right on schedule. From my balcony, I watched their car pull into the private drive. Sleek, silver, leased. Tiffany emerged first, sunglasses on despite the gray light, her heels clicking like applause. Jason followed, clutching a folder that probably contained pre-approval letters and a performance he'd practiced in the mirror. Inside, Evan met them with the calm efficiency that came from knowing exactly who he worked for. Jason's voice carried through the penthouse hallway, bright with the energy of someone trying to impress a stranger. It's perfect, Tiffany. Look at that view. North and east exposure, corner unit, no shared walls. It's practically custom. Tiffany floated from room to room, running manicured fingers along the marble counters, the same stone I'd chosen 2 decades ago. Finally, she said, half to herself, something that feels like us. Evan handed over the property brochure, keeping his tone neutral. The owner prefers to stay anonymous. It's held by a corporation, Harper Holdings, LLC. Jason didn't even blink at the name. Why would he? He was too busy selling his own reflection to the floor-to-ceiling glass. Tiffany turned to him, grinning. They'll love having us here. Young professionals, clean credit, solid income. Evan nodded politely but didn't respond. The irony might have choked a less disciplined man. As they moved toward the balcony, Jason asked, Is there any wiggle room on price? It's listed a little high. Evan smiled. Market rate. Non-negotiable. But the owner's open to tenants who appreciate quality. Tiffany slipped her arm through Jason's. We appreciate it, she said quickly. We'll apply today. 2 hours later, the email arrived in my inbox. Tenant application, Harper, Jason, and Tiffany. I stared at the names for a long moment. The letters looked foreign now, stripped of their entitlement and reduced to data. Credit scores, income statements, employment verification. Numbers, the language Jason thought defined worth. His credit was, as expected, strained. Too many balances carried forward, a few late payments buried under optimistic income projections. Still, the algorithm approved it after Evan's corporate override. My override. I opened the lease template and filled in the blanks with steady precision. Harper Holdings, LLC, owner. Jason Harper, tenant. Monthly rent, $6,900 due on the 1st. Deposit, 2 months, non-refundable. I signed my name on the dotted line, Linda Harper, managing member, and saved the file. When I hit send, a strange calm settled over me. Not triumph, not malice, just justice, measured and quiet. Clara came by that evening with soup and skepticism. You're glowing again, she said, setting down the pot. So, what's the latest chapter in your domestic thriller? They applied, I said, stirring sugar into my tea. They? Her eyebrows shot up. As in, your son and his discount duchess? The very same. And? They were approved. Clara blinked. You're collecting rent from your own son. Consider it tuition for humility, I said. She laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. Linda, you are an American classic. Somewhere, your accountant is weeping tears of joy. I smiled. He'll survive. This is the first investment that pays emotional dividends. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, cautious flakes that vanished against the warmth of the glass. Clara watched me for a long moment, her amusement fading into something like awe. You really think he won't find out? Oh, he'll find out, I said quietly, gazing at the skyline. Just not yet. She tilted her head. And when he does? I turned back to her, voice calm, certain. Then the education begins. Down below, I could see Jason's car pulling away from the building, Tiffany leaning into him, animated, radiant. They were laughing, full of that dangerous hope that comes right before the fall. I pressed my fingertips to the glass, watching the taillights disappear into traffic. Welcome home, I whispered. They moved in on a Friday, the same day the city thawed enough for Tiffany's ego to bloom. By Monday, her social feeds were full of angles of the apartment, filtered sunsets through glass, staged charcuterie boards, Jason's reflection caught in every other post. The captions read like ad copy. Dreams don't just come true, they level up. By Wednesday, I received the text. Dinner Friday. Jason wants you to see the new place. We'll cook. Dress nice. It's kind of our first real home. The subtext, of course, was clearer than the invite. Come admire what we've built. Clara saw the message and nearly spit out her tea. Dress nice, she repeated. Is this dinner or a coronation? Both, probably, I said, folding the invitation into my pocket. It would be rude not to attend. Rude, she muttered. That woman could weaponize politeness. When I arrived, Tiffany greeted me at the door wearing silk and triumph. The apartment was lit too bright, every recessed bulb working overtime to spotlight their success. A white orchid sat on the entry table, its price tag discreetly hidden but still visible, if you knew where to look. Linda, she sang, you made it. Jason was worried you might be intimidated by dinner. I smiled. I've survived audits, dear. Her laugh was high and glassy. Oh, you're too funny. Come in, please. Jason's just finishing the steaks. The moment I stepped inside, familiarity struck me. Not just in the layout, but in the bones of the place. The curve of the marble island, the trim along the ceiling, even the placement of the light fixtures. I had designed all of it years ago. PH2 had always been a mirror to my own home, just a floor lower, just slightly less. Jason emerged from the kitchen, wearing an apron like a costume. Mom, wow, you look great. I had to rise to the occasion, I said. He laughed, genuinely pleased with himself. What do you think? He gestured broadly as if unveiling an empire. Big step up from the old condo, huh? I let my eyes travel slowly over the room, the clean lines, the lake glimmering through the glass, the faint smell of new paint still fighting to cover the past. I think, I said after a pause, it feels oddly familiar. Tiffany exchanged a quick look with Jason before pouring wine into stemless glasses. Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, right? I smiled. So I've heard. Dinner was fine. Tiffany made a show of serving each plate herself, commenting loudly on the imported ingredients and the view from their penthouse. Jason recited work updates like victories, new clients, promotions, numbers I'd once helped him understand when he was too young to balance a checkbook. I let him talk. Sometimes silence is the sharpest mirror. Midway through the meal, Tiffany leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know, Linda, it's funny. We're only one floor below the actual penthouse. She winked. Maybe one day we'll trade up. You'll have to visit a real one then. Her voice carried the sugary lilt of condescension, carefully packaged as charm. I set my wine down gently. Maybe sooner than you think. She laughed, assuming it was a joke. Jason smiled politely, missing the current underneath. As dessert arrived, store-bought cheesecake pretending to be artisanal, Tiffany launched into a speech about manifesting abundance and energetic alignment with success. I nodded where appropriate, eyes drifting to the details she hadn't changed. The etched molding I'd picked myself, the subtle imperfections in the marble slab that only I would recognize. Every inch of this space carried my fingerprint, and she was dining inside it without ever realizing whose house she was truly in. When the evening wound down, Jason insisted on walking me to the door. "It means a lot that you came," he said earnestly. "Tiffany really wanted you to see what we've built together." "I'm proud of you," I said softly. And I meant it, in a way. Proud that he was finally living in the world he'd chosen, the one he valued above love. He smiled, relief washing through him. "Thanks, Mom." As I stepped into the hallway, Tiffany's laughter echoed from the dining room, bright, brittle, echoing off walls I owned. Evan was waiting in the elevator when it opened. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Educational?" I said. He smiled knowingly. "For who?" I pressed the button for the top floor. "We'll find out soon enough." The doors slid shut, sealing the silence between floors, the smallest distance in the world, yet enough to separate illusion from ownership. And as the elevator climbed, I couldn't help but think, sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't in what you say, but in what they never suspect. Chicago thawed into gossip. It always did once the snow started melting. The building's lobby became its own ecosystem of whispers. Doormen trading stories like currency, residents dropping secrets between coffee orders. And as Clara would later tell me, one of those whispers had my son's name on it. She called just after noon, her voice half amusement, half exasperation. "Guess who's suddenly the talk of the condo board?" "I'll bite," I said, stirring honey into my tea. "Your golden boy, Jason Harper. Apparently, he's been bragging about his exclusive building connection." I almost laughed. Connection? His words, not mine. He told the board president that he got the apartment because of his family's influence. She snorted. Which, technically, isn't wrong, but not for the reason he thinks. I smiled, setting my cup down. Let him brag. Pride always comes before paperwork. That evening, the phone buzzed again, Evan's name flashing on the screen. He sounded equal parts amused and wary. "You're going to love this," he said. "Your son and his wife just stopped by the leasing office. They're trying to refinance their lease. Said they're negotiating a better monthly rate since they're such valuable tenants." "Of course they are," I murmured. "And?" "I told them the corporation that owns the property doesn't negotiate with individuals," he said, suppressing a chuckle. But they were persistent. Tiffany said she'd have her financial advisor reach out directly to Harper Holdings LLC. The pause between us stretched like a grin. "Evan," I said, "when they finally read the fine print, they'll learn who their landlord really is. He exhaled, laughing softly. You're playing a long game, Linda. I'm just turning the page, I said, carefully. A few days later, Tiffany's followers were treated to another curated spectacle. The notification popped up on my phone before Clara even had time to warn me. New video from Tiffany Heights, our luxury Chicago penthouse tour, Jan, skyline living, couple goals. I watched it once, then again. She walked through PH2 in slow motion, trailing her fingers along my marble counters, showing off the fixtures I'd chosen before she could spell mortgage. Can you believe this view? She cooed into the camera. We manifested every inch of it. Hard work pays off. The comments poured in like applause. So chic. You two are goals. That kitchen is everything. And it was everything, because I had built it that way. Clara arrived mid-scroll, catching the end of Tiffany's breathy narration. Oh, for heaven's sake, she said, tossing her gloves on the counter. If she calls that place a penthouse one more time, I might file a restraining order. She's just doing what she knows, I said, closing the video. Packaging fantasy. Still, Clara muttered, it must sting. Watching her monetize your square footage. I looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Sting? No. Remind me, yes. Precision is better than revenge. Translation. You're planning something. I'm adjusting something. That night, I opened the digital lease agreement. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat as I reviewed each clause. Everything was tidy, lawful, exact. Still, there was room for refinement. I added a new line under payment instructions. Effective immediately, all rent must be paid directly to Harper Holdings, LLC. No third-party processing or automatic transfers permitted. Simple, invisible, binding. By morning, the update was filed, time-stamped, and sent. Paperwork, my preferred form of poetry. When I told Clara, she grinned. Subtle, surgical even. You're tightening the net without them ever seeing it. Not a net, I said. A mirror. I'm just letting them see the reflection when it's time. Later that evening, standing on my balcony, I could see the glow from their unit below. Tiffany was filming again, ring light haloing her hair, Jason hovering just off camera, laughing on cue. From up here, they looked miniature, like figures in a snow globe that had stopped shaking. Evan texted then. Lease update processed. They'll see the new payment clause next month. I typed back. Perfect. Let's keep it quiet. For a while, I stayed by the window, watching the light in their apartment flicker through the misty night. Their laughter floated upward faintly, blending with the hum of the city. Two voices living a dream financed by irony. As I turned off my lamp, my reflection darkened in the glass, and I whispered to it, "The leak always starts with pride." And somewhere below, I imagined Jason, unaware that the roof over his head, the marble under his feet, even the air he bragged about, already belonged to me. It began with a phone call Jason wasn't expecting. Monday morning, 8:14 a.m., his bank. "Mr. Harper," the woman said politely, "I'm calling about your automatic rent transfers. The property management company has updated your payment routing. Going forward, all funds must be paid directly to Harper Holdings, LLC. Harper? He repeated, the word catching on his tongue. Wait, Harper? Yes, sir. It's listed as the corporate landlord for your property. You'll just need to update your records to reflect that. He hung up before she could finish the sentence. Tiffany was in the kitchen, filming an iced coffee tutorial. He stormed in mid-recording. Did you know our landlord's company is called Harper Holdings? She frowned, lowering her phone. What? That's just a coincidence. Coincidence? He opened his laptop, typing furiously. No one uses our name in business, it's too specific. Maybe it's a family trust, she said, rolling her eyes. Relax. It's probably just another developer trying to sound boutique. But he didn't relax. He couldn't. The sound of his own last name attached to the word holdings hit something primal. Tiffany sighed, impatient now. Fine, I'll look into it. You'll drive yourself insane. She did what Tiffany always did best, turned curiosity into performance. Within an hour, she'd found public business filings, cross-referenced them with county records, and opened a trail she never meant to follow. See? She said, pointing at the screen. It's just an LLC registered to... Her voice stopped. Jason leaned over her shoulder. To who? Tiffany scrolled down, her manicured finger trembling slightly as she read the name listed under managing member. Linda Harper. The silence stretched between them like a bridge set on fire from both ends. Jason's jaw tightened. No, that can't... Jason, she whispered. Your mother owns this building. His breath went shallow, his hands gripping the back of her chair. No, she rents here. She's retired, Apparently, Tiffany said, swallowing hard. She's also your landlord. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The irony sat in the room like smoke, visible, choking, undeniable. Then Jason grabbed his keys. I'm going to her. Tiffany tried to stop him. Jason, don't... But the door had already slammed. I was halfway through dinner when the pounding began. Clara froze mid-sentence, fork in hand. Evan looked up from the opposite side of the table, brows drawn. Expecting anyone? He asked. I sighed, already knowing. Apparently, yes. The door swung open before I reached it. Jason burst into the room, face flushed, coat unbuttoned, the kind of rage that doesn't ask permission. You made me pay you rent? His voice cracked with disbelief more than fury. You, my own mother? For a heartbeat, the world went still. The only sound was the faint clink of Clara setting down her glass. I met his eyes, steady, calm. Jason, you should lower your voice. This is not the place for theatrics. This is the place, he shouted. Your place. The one you've been living in while making me, us, pay you like strangers. Evan quietly stood, shielding his daughter Olivia from the tension. We'll give you a minute, he murmured, ushering her toward the hall. When the door clicked shut behind them, I turned back to my son. Sit down. I'm not sitting, he said, voice shaking. How could you do this? I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after baseball games, now pacing my marble floors as if he'd earned them. You said you couldn't live with a mother who earned less, I said quietly. So I solved that problem? He blinked, confusion mixing with fury. What does that even mean? It means, I said, rising slowly, that you finally got what you wanted. A mother who lives above you, not beneath you. He stared at me, the truth sinking in like cold water. You, he started, but words failed. Clara stood from the table, her tone clipped. Jason, maybe it's time you realize that not all inheritance is about money. He turned toward her, eyes glassy. You knew? I advised, she said simply. She decided. He looked back at me, breath shallow, the weight of his pride collapsing in on itself. You're unbelievable. I smiled faintly. You said that once before, but now you understand what it costs. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was revelation. Finally, he stepped back, shaking his head. "You humiliated me," he whispered. "No, Jason," I said softly. "You did that all by yourself." He left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. When the door shut, Clara exhaled. "Well," she said dryly, "that's one dinner we won't forget." Evan peeked back in, Olivia in tow. "Everything okay?" I nodded, my voice steady but quiet. "It will be." Then I turned toward the window, watching Jason's taillights vanish into the city haze. He'd come looking for dominance and left with perspective. And as I lifted my glass, the skyline shimmered like applause. Lesson 1, I whispered to myself. Value is never borrowed. It's owned. The next morning arrived like an echo of the night before. Sharp, cold, unrepentant. I hadn't slept much. The city outside looked colorless, like even the sun didn't want to get involved. By 8, I knew he'd come. Pride doesn't rest. It reloads. The buzzer rang once, short and hard. Clara, already perched at my kitchen table with her coffee, muttered, "Round 2." When I opened the door, Jason didn't wait for permission. He came in hot, tie askew, eyes red, voice already trembling with exhaustion disguised as fury. "You humiliated me," he spat, not a greeting but a verdict. I took in his appearance, the undone collar, the hollow under his eyes. "No, Jason," I said quietly. "You priced yourself out of grace." He froze, uncertain if it was an insult or a truth. "You've been playing me," he said, voice cracking, "making me pay like some stranger." "You made yourself a stranger," I replied, still calm. "You built walls with numbers and expected them to look like respect." He paced, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea what Tiffany's saying right now? She's furious. She thinks you—" "She's welcome to think whatever she likes," I interrupted. "I'm not running a public relations campaign." As if on cue, Tiffany appeared in the doorway. She hadn't buzzed. Of course she hadn't. She breezed in, all perfume and sharp edges, holding her phone like a weapon. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "We'll move out tomorrow, find a new place, somewhere with honesty." I met her gaze, steady. "Your lease says 60 days notice." "Read it." She blinked, thrown off by my composure. "You can't force us to stay." "I'm not forcing you to do anything," I said. "You signed a contract. Follow it." Jason turned to her, panic under his anger. "Tiff, just stop." "No, Jason. She's treating us like tenants, like children." Clara, who'd stayed mercifully silent until now, spoke from behind me. "Children usually come with less paperwork." Tiffany glared at her. "And you? What are you, her lawyer?" "Occasionally," Clara said, unbothered. "And trust me, you don't want to see how airtight that lease is." Jason's voice rose again, breaking under the strain. "I can't believe this, Mom. You went behind my back just to prove a point." "I didn't go behind your back," I said. "You just never looked up." He flinched at that. Small, involuntary, but I saw it. Evan arrived then, stepping out from the elevator vestibule, his presence quiet but grounding. "Everything okay here?" he asked carefully. Jason turned, fists tight. "You knew, didn't you?" Evan's expression didn't waver. "I know the owner," he said simply. "And I know she deserves respect inside her own home." Jason's voice dropped to a growl. "This isn't over." "No," I said softly. "It's just finally honest." He looked between us, chest rising and falling too fast. Then, without another word, he spun toward the door. Tiffany followed, muttering something about lawyers and betrayal. As they reached the hallway, Evan pressed a button on his key fob. The back elevator, A private one leading directly to the garage, clicked into a temporary lock cycle. Jason tugged at the door handle, realized, then turned back, his pride too bruised to ask. Evan's tone stayed professional. That route's closed for maintenance. Service elevators only today. Jason glared but said nothing. He walked the long way out, shoes echoing down the corridor until silence swallowed the space he'd left behind. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The penthouse felt too big, too still. Clara finally broke the quiet. "You should feel smug," she said, leaning back in her chair. "That was textbook poetic justice." I stared at the glass wall overlooking the lake. "Smug?" I repeated. "No, I feel sad." Clara's voice softened. "Why?" "Because he mistook wealth for worth," I said. "And somewhere along the way, I let him." She reached over and placed a hand on mine. "You didn't create his blindness, Linda. You just turned on the lights." Outside, the skyline shimmered against the dusk. Sharp, unfeeling, magnificent. Somewhere down there, my son was learning the cost of elevation. I stood walking to the window, pressing my hand against the cold pane. The city lights reflected both our faces, mine steady, his ghost faint in memory. "He'll come around," Clara said behind me. "Maybe," I murmured. "But first, he'll fall." And as the wind howled softly against the glass, I whispered to my reflection, "The higher they climb on ego, the harder they hear the truth when it lands." The city had entered that brittle part of March where the snow was gone, but winter still clung to the wind. Everything looked clean from a distance and cruel up close. Word of Jason's fall reached me before he did. It always does, with men like him. The story travels faster than the truth. Clara heard first, naturally. She called one afternoon, voice low and almost apologetic. "He lost the Hanford account," she said. Apparently, the client pulled out after he talked down to one of their junior partners in front of the board. Word spread. Nobody wants to work with him. I stood by the window, tracing my finger along the glass where condensation had gathered. "Arrogance," I said softly, "is a poor investment." Clara sighed. "You knew it would happen." "I suspected," I said, "but knowing doesn't make it painless." She paused. "Do you think he'll come to you?" "No," I said, watching a gull arc low over the lake. "Not yet. First, he has to lose something he loves." It didn't take long. By the weekend, Tiffany had fled to her parents' house in Milwaukee. Her feed had transformed overnight. Quotes about boundaries, black and white selfies, captions like, "Sometimes you outgrow the version of yourself someone fell for." To her followers, it was performance art. To Jason, it was desertion. He stopped posting, stopped appearing at work, stopped being seen. When Evan mentioned that the lights in PH2 stayed off most nights, I knew. He was there, but hollowed out, moving through rooms that had once made him feel powerful and now made him feel small. So I called. "Jason," I said when he answered, his voice wary, quiet. "Come up for coffee?" He hesitated. I could hear the breath catch, the debate behind it. Then finally, "All right." When he arrived, he looked thinner. Expensive suit, but unshaven. The exhaustion around his eyes no longer something he could hide. The smell of roasted coffee filled the kitchen. Familiar. Grounding. I poured 2 cups and slid one across the counter. He didn't touch it. "You could have told me?" he said. His tone wasn't angry this time, just bewildered. "Told you what?" "That you own the penthouse. The building. All of it." I looked at him steadily. "And would it have changed how you treated me?" He didn't answer. You said you couldn't live with a mother who earned less, I continued. So I gave you the life you wanted. One floor below mine. It was your choice to turn it into humiliation. He stared at the steam curling from his cup, the muscles in his jaw twitching. Why hide it, Mom? Why not just tell me the truth from the beginning? I studied him, the son who'd once counted my coins for fun when I was teaching him how to budget. Because, I said, I wanted to see who you'd be when you thought I had nothing. The words landed heavy between us. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time in years, I saw the boy again. The one who used to build Lego towers beside my desk, who once cried when his father's watch stopped ticking. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. Now I know, he whispered. I waited. Know what? He swallowed hard. What I became. And what I lost doing it. There was no satisfaction in it for me, just a strange, aching clarity. Pride stripped down to grief. He finally picked up the coffee cup, held it in both hands like it might anchor him. Tiffany's gone, he said quietly. Took the car. Took the followers. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. He gave a hollow laugh. You warned me about her. I warned you about mirrors, I corrected. You just didn't realize you were marrying one. He nodded, staring at the city below. What do I do now? Start over, I said. Not with money, with decency. He looked out at the skyline, eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of dawn creeping in. It's strange, he murmured. The view doesn't look the same anymore. Views never do, I said softly. Once you stop looking down. He turned to me then. No anger, no pride, just raw, uncertain humility. For the first time in years, we sat in silence that didn't feel like distance. He finally said, Can I come by again tomorrow? Of course, I replied. When he left, I stood at the window, watching him walk toward the elevator. His reflection caught briefly in the glass, two figures overlapping for just a moment before his faded from view. In the stillness that followed, I realized something simple, profound, and terrifying. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive as an apology. It arrives as exhaustion, when the ego finally runs out of air. Spring arrived in Chicago like a quiet apology. The air softened, the lake shimmered again, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to ease. Jason had been coming by every Sunday now. No lectures, no bravado, just coffee, quiet conversation, the beginnings of something that felt almost like repair. So when Evan called one afternoon, his voice carrying that measured excitement he used when he was up to something, I should have known. Linda, he said, don't argue with me yet, just listen. Always a promising start, I replied. There's this community event next month. The Chamber of Commerce is honoring women who've quietly shaped the city's economy. Unsung Women of Chicago. I nominated you. I laughed, thinking he was joking. Evan, I haven't worked in years. That's the point, he said. You didn't stop being who you were. You just did it without needing applause. I don't do speeches anymore, he chuckled. You will this once. Trust me. It's time the city saw who really owns the skyline. The night of the ceremony arrived in gold light and nerves I hadn't felt since my first job interview. Clara rode with me, pretending not to fuss while she double-checked my earrings, my notes, my composure. You realize, she said as we stepped out of the car, this is poetic justice, being honored for the very thing your son thought you didn't have. Justice isn't my goal, I said, smoothing my dress. Perspective is. Inside, the ballroom hummed with easy chatter and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. I caught my reflection in a mirrored pillar. Still me, still steady. Somewhere near the back, I saw him. Jason. No spotlight. No entrance. Just sitting quietly in a dark suit, eyes fixed on the stage. He didn't wave. I didn't either. But we both knew the distance had changed. It wasn't pride anymore. It was respect, learning how to breathe. Evan and Clara flanked me as the MC called my name. Linda Harper, financial advisor, mentor, property investor, and community advocate. The applause was warm but distant in my ears. As I walked up, I saw flashbulbs spark, but all I could think of was the hundreds of nights I'd sat at a desk balancing invisible books. Family, dignity, forgiveness. The podium lights were blinding, the room vast. I unfolded my notes but didn't look down. I spent most of my life helping people balance their accounts. I began, voice steady. But the numbers were never the real story. They were just reflections of what we value. A quiet ripple of attention moved through the crowd. People measure worth in titles, I continued. In the size of their homes, the digits on a paycheck. But I've learned that the greatest return on investment is integrity. It compounds silently, year after year, until one day you realize it's the only wealth that can't be taken from you. A pause. My throat tightened, but I let the moment sit. We talk about success like altitude, but sometimes the higher you go, the less you see. Humility, I've found, restores your sight. Applause rose, slow at first, then full, sincere. I blinked against the light, and in the blur beyond it, I caught a single image. Jason, standing now, eyes glassy, clapping once, twice, then simply watching. I nodded slightly, a gesture meant only for him. When the applause faded, I stepped off stage. Clara was waiting, her eyes bright with unshed pride. "You gave him grace even now," she whispered. "He needed it more than money," I said. "Grace is the only currency that appreciates with loss." Evan joined us, grinning. "You realize the news cameras caught that, right? You, the skyline behind you, and the real penthouse glowing like a halo. Couldn't have staged it better." I smiled. Let them film. It's about time people learned that silence can build empires, too. Outside, as the evening wind swept off Lake Michigan, Jason found me by the doors. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city sparkled behind him, endless and alive. He finally said, "You were right. The view looks different when you earn it." I touched his arm, a quiet acknowledgement. "You're starting to see the ground again. That's a good sign." As he turned to leave, cameras still flashing beyond the glass, I looked up toward the top floors of the building reflected in the windows. My penthouse glowed softly against the dark, steady, and untouchable, a light no one could take credit for but me. And for the first time, I didn't feel above anyone. I just felt whole. By early summer, the city had settled into its rhythm again, boats carving trails across Lake Michigan, the skyline gleaming like ambition polished to perfection. I'd stopped waiting for storms. They'd already come and gone, and what was left was quieter, cleaner. Clara arrived that morning with her ever-present briefcase and 2 cups of coffee. "Signatures and witnesses," she said briskly, though her tone softened as she looked at me. "You're sure about this?" "More than ever," I replied. "It's time to balance the final ledger." We sat at the marble counter, the same one where so many plans had been made and undone. She opened the file, its neat tabs and legal seals catching the light. "Okay," she said, flipping through. "Let's go over it one last time. 40% to the Community Financial Empowerment Trust. You'll fund scholarships and training for single mothers. Another 40 to a scholarship fund under Olivia Wells's name. I smiled at that. The girl has more heart than half the city combined. She deserves a head start. Clara hesitated before continuing. And the remaining 20% to Jason. Conditional on steady employment for a minimum of 5 consecutive years. I nodded, calm, deliberate. She sighed, sitting back. You're rewarding him after everything he put you through? I met her eyes. Punishment doesn't reform pride. Example does. Still, she muttered, sliding her glasses up her nose, it's a generous example. Not generosity, I said. Accountability. He'll have to earn what he once assumed was owed. That's the only inheritance worth leaving. Clara watched me for a long time, then gave a small, approving nod. You've managed to turn revenge into grace. That's an art form. Or a survival skill, I said quietly. The next day, the documents were notarized, sealed, and stored in my attorney's office. The act of signing them felt like closing a door. Not with anger, but with understanding. I'd spent decades teaching others to prepare for their financial futures. It was strange, finally doing it for myself, not to protect wealth, but to direct meaning. Weeks passed. The city brightened under the hum of summer, and for once, my days were unhurried. Evan stopped by with Olivia sometimes. She'd draw pictures of the sparkly building and leave them on my fridge. Her favorite, a crayon sketch of the penthouse under a smiling sun, said in uneven letters, "Home in the clouds." When Clara joined us one afternoon, she caught sight of the drawing and smiled. "Poetic," she said. "Children usually are," I replied, "before the world starts teaching them interest rates." She chuckled. "You ever think about telling Jason what you've done?" "He'll find out," I said softly. "And when he does, I'd rather it surprise his heart than his wallet." It happened sooner than I expected. Jason showed up unannounced one evening, looking different. Older in the way that comes from introspection, not time. He'd started working at a smaller firm, he said. No corner office, no inflated title, just steady hours and real clients. He'd even taken up running. He didn't know about the will yet, but he seemed lighter, less defensive. "I've been meaning to thank you," he said, "for not throwing me away when I probably deserved it." "Families don't get thrown away," I said. "They get rewritten." He smiled faintly, the kind that lingers long after the moment. 2 weeks later, Clara called to tell me he'd finally received the estate notice. "He showed up at my office," she said. "Didn't say a word, just read every line. When he got to the part about Olivia's fund, he cried, quietly. The kind of crying people do when they realize the lesson wasn't cruelty, it was love." I said nothing for a while, just stared out at the lake, the horizon glowing pink under the setting sun. "And Tiffany?" I asked eventually. "She called him, actually," Clara said. "Wanted one more chance. You'll be happy to know he told her no." A silence stretched between us, warm, clean, final. That night, I stood on my balcony. The city sprawled below like a constellation of everything I'd survived. The air smelled faintly of rain and lilacs. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was guarding something. I just felt done. Complete. I slipped off my shoes, let my feet rest against the cool marble floor, and looked up at the sky, a perfect mirror of quiet power. Down below, Jason's window glowed faintly. He was home, working late maybe. No posts, no noise, no show, just living. Clara's words drifted back to me. "You turned revenge into grace." I smiled, whispering to the night, Grace was always the better currency. And for the first time in a long, relentless story, I slept without replaying it. Peace had finally cleared its balance. By the time autumn rolled around again, the city had traded its arrogance for amber light. The skyline shimmered in warmer tones, softer, like even Chicago had learned something about humility. I'd taken to keeping the balcony doors open in the afternoons, letting the air move freely through the penthouse. The place felt alive again, less like a fortress, more like a home. Jason called first this time. No agenda in his voice, no tight edge of pride, just a simple question. Can I come by this weekend? Of course, I said, though I waited a moment before adding, You don't have to ask, Jason. You never did. He paused. I know. That's kind of the point. He arrived on a Sunday, just as the light began to bend gold across the water. I met him at the door, but this time he didn't stride in. He paused on the threshold, looking around with a quiet awe that seemed to reach every corner. It's beautiful, Mom, he said, almost reverent. I smiled, motioning him inside. It always was, I said gently. You just couldn't see it when you looked down. He gave a small, rueful laugh. I see it now. There was no bravado left in him, only the weight of reflection, the kind that doesn't need confession to be understood. We settled in the living room, coffee between us, the city murmuring faintly through the glass. For a while, we said nothing. Silence used to divide us. Now it felt like shared ground. Finally, he spoke. I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, about how he used to say the world measures everything except decency. I nodded. Your father was good at being quietly right. Jason's gaze stayed on the skyline. I wasn't. I wanted to be seen so badly I stopped seeing anyone else. That's not permanent, I said softly. Perspective can be earned. He looked down at his hands. I think I'm starting to understand that. I reached across the table, resting my hand over his. Forgiveness isn't a gift you wait to receive, Jason. It's something you give yourself first. The rest follows. He nodded, swallowing hard. You forgave me anyway. I had to, I said. Otherwise, I'd still be trying to prove I was right. That's no way to live. He smiled faintly. You sound like you've been talking to Clara. I laughed. Clara talks like me now. Don't tell her that. It'll ruin her fun. As if summoned by name, the private elevator chimed. Clara stepped out, carrying a stack of documents and a box of pastries. Evan followed with Olivia in tow, the little girl skipping ahead before anyone could stop her. Mr. Jason! Olivia exclaimed, rushing over. You're here. Jason blinked, startled, then smiled. I am. How have you been, kiddo? She giggled. I made a picture for your mom. Of course you did, I said, amused. She's our resident artist. Clara handed me the pastries. Peace offerings, in case this reunion got tense. Evan gave a wry grin. Doesn't look tense to me. Olivia had already made herself at home on the balcony, pressing her palms against the glass to watch the sunlight glitter on the lake. It's so high up, she said, breathless. Like you can see forever. Jason joined her by the window, watching the reflection of the city in the glass. It's not about seeing farther, he said quietly. It's about finally seeing clearly. Clara shot me a look, half proud, half teasing. Seems peace rents well here. I smiled, turning toward her. Some things, I said. You keep ownership of forever. Evan raised his cup in a small toast. To peace, then. To perspective, Clara added. Jason looked at me, his expression soft but sure. To starting over. We clinked our glasses lightly. The sound was delicate, almost like wind chimes, but it carried through the room with surprising strength. Outside, the lake caught the last of the afternoon sun, scattering it in shards of gold. Olivia laughed, spinning in slow circles on the balcony, her joy so unfiltered it felt like an absolution. For a brief, perfect moment, I saw it all as it was meant to be. No hierarchy, no resentment, just life, simple and whole. And as I watched my son, no longer the man obsessed with altitude, but the man who'd finally found his footing, I thought, sometimes healing doesn't echo like thunder. Sometimes it's just the sound of laughter in a room that used to hold silence. Dawn came slow that morning, the kind of sunrise that doesn't rush its entrance. Chicago shimmered in layers of soft gold and muted blue, the lake folding light like silk. I stood barefoot on the balcony, coffee warming my hands, the air still cool enough to remind me that even the brightest days begin in shadow. The skyline stretched before me, proud, scarred, forgiven. Every tower carried a story: ambition, collapse, rebirth. Mine too, I supposed. For a long while, I didn't move. I just watched the world exhale. Below, the streets were already stirring, delivery trucks humming, joggers tracing the edge of the lake, a woman walking her dog with the easy calm of someone who still believed mornings mattered. Inside, the clock ticked faintly, steady and unbothered. It was the only sound. Then my phone buzzed on the table. Jason. Just 2 lines. Thank you for letting me see the view. I read it twice before answering. You earned it, the hard way. A few minutes passed, and the typing dots blinked, then vanished. No reply, none needed. I set the phone down and leaned against the railing, the city glowing awake beneath me. He'd made peace not by climbing higher, but by learning to stand level. With himself, with me, with the world he'd once tried to outshine. There was a quiet beauty in that. Somewhere below, I imagined him in his smaller office, the one with the cracked window and the honest paycheck. Maybe he'd stop at the cafe we used to visit when he was a boy, where he'd beg for extra sugar in his cocoa and call me the richest mom in the world. Back then, I'd thought he meant money. Now I knew better. The penthouse was still, full of light and absence. But it wasn't lonely. It was lived in. By forgiveness, by perspective, by the echo of laughter that had finally learned to stay. The phone rang again. Clara. I was wondering when my favorite ghost would call, I said, smiling into the receiver. Ghost? Please. Queens don't haunt. They reign, she quipped. So what's next for the queen in the clouds? Nothing royal, I said, glancing toward the horizon. Just to stay grounded. Clara snorted softly. Only you could live 40 stories up and call it grounding. I've learned altitude has nothing to do with height, I said. It's just how close you stand to your own truth. There was a pause, the kind of silence that meant she understood. You did it, you know, she said finally. You raised a man who finally learned to look up without looking down on anyone. I smiled, and I unlearned how to look down at myself. You sound peaceful, she said. I am. Good, she replied, voice softening. Then I'll stop checking in every other day. Maybe. I wouldn't dream of holding you to that, I said, laughing. We hung up, and I turned back to the skyline. The sun had risen fully now, painting the lake in pale fire. The glass towers caught its reflection like confession, every imperfection made beautiful by light. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted stronger this morning, less like habit, more like reward. My gaze drifted upward, To the mirrored buildings, to my reflection framed against the city I'd built a life above yet never left behind. For once, I didn't see the penthouse as height or privilege. It was simply a vantage point, the proof that survival, when done with grace, becomes its own architecture. The wind lifted a strand of my hair, cool and certain. I let it move through me, not resisting, because this was it. Not triumph, not revenge, but arrival. The city belonged to no one, really. But standing there, I felt as though I finally belonged to it. I finished the last of my coffee, set the cup down, and whispered to the morning, a smile threading through the words. He said he couldn't live with a mother who earned less. The lake glimmered, sunlight splintering across the waves like applause. He was right, I said softly, because I was already living far above him. And as the skyline burned gold against the breaking day, I turned away from the window, not to close the curtains, but to open the next chapter in peace.